So today I want to talk about something called the Sator Square. Wikipedia describes it like this. The Sator Square, or the Rotas Sator Square, or the Templar Magic Square, is a two-dimensional acrostic class of word square containing a five-word Latin palindrome. You can look off to the right, you can see the square. The word at the top, Sator. Below that is Arepo. Below that is Tenet. Below that is opera. Below that is rotas. In some of the squares, the word rotas is at the top. So in this case, we see the word rotas. Down below, you see Sator. Sator backwards is rotas. The left column, starting from the top, Rotas, rotas. The right hand column, from the top, Sator. Again, Sator backwards is rotas. Look at the second line, arepo. The second line from the bottom is opera, so opera spelled backwards is arepo. Third line down, or the middle line, is the word tenet. Backwards it's tenet. It's a palindrome there. Look at the middle column, Tenet, tenet. Backwards is tenet. And you may have heard of the movie Tenet. I believe it was David Nolan that came out with that one. It's a very interesting movie. And it definitely takes into account the Sator Square. This video really isn't about the movie Tenet, but I just felt like I should mention it. All of the words in the Sator Square can be found in the movie Tenet. Look at the top line, Sator. That's the name of the main antagonist. His company, his security company, I believe, was called Rotas, which again is Sator backwards. A repo is I believe it was a person they were looking for, an art forger. A repo backwards is opera, and the very first scene of the movie Tenet takes place in an opera. And again, this video really isn't about that movie, but it felt like I should mention it. And something else I should mention is that characters in this movie, you could see a scene where one character is experiencing time backwards, while in the same scene, another character is experiencing time forwards. And of course, that falls right in line with the theme of this magic square, if you will. It's a palindrome. And the very center is the letter N, and this is important. N is the 14th letter of the English alphabet. And this video is going to be all about the number 14 and some connections with the number 14. Going to talk about 14 squared. Here we're talking about a magic square, palindromic magic square. But we're going to talk about 14 squared, 14 times itself. We're going to talk about the 14th triangular number, the 14th Fibonacci number. There's many different variations of this magic square. It always has the same letters, but the variation that I'm concerned about is the one off to the left. You can see there's a few letters that are facing backwards. The letter S in Sator is facing backwards, as you can see. And to contrast, you see the logo in the middle, SNS. The letters are facing forward. On either side of that logo is a Sator Square where the letters are facing exactly the same way here. The square on the left is basically the same as the square on the right. The letter S in Sator is backwards. The letter N in Tenet, in the very center, is backwards. And at the bottom right corner, Rotas, the letter S in Rotas is backwards. Like I said, there's many variations of this square. There's many locations where a square like this has been found. Wikipedia shows that image of the backwards facing S, backwards N, and the backwards S. All the other letters appear to be facing forwards, and this is a bit tricky, so we're going to have to wait. I'm going to get to that a little bit later. But I was wondering why these letters faced that way. We're going to put that image in a mirror a little bit later on. Now, if you do a little bit of research on this Sator Square, you can find out that it's been discussed, at least debated a bit, if this has some history with Christianity. And one such example is that if you take the letters of the Sator Square and just face them all forwards, okay, for this example here. All the letters, look off to the right, you can see what looks like a cross and the words Pater Noster going up and down, and then Pater Noster across. They meet at the letter N. And then there's leftover OA, AO. And the explanation I read and heard at first seemed a little fishy, because they said the OA is like omega and alpha, alpha and omega, AO. And, of course, there's a biblical theme there. Jesus says, I am the alpha and the omega, these Greek letters, the first and the last. And then you have Pater Noster, which means our Father in Latin. That's, of course, the Lord's Prayer starts, Our Father, who art in heaven. So it is interesting, but I thought, the letter A does look like an alpha, but the letter O actually is a different Greek letter. It's Omicron. But the omega, the transliteration omega, begins with an O. So OA, alpha omega. And this is a palindromic square, but the only words that are actually a perfect palindrome are the word Tenet across, and then Tenet going up and down. And that forms a cross. So there you have that. And there's different definitions of the word tenet. But if you think about the 10 commandments, they're tenets, right? The number 10 is a triangular number. It's the fourth. So if you add the numbers 1 through 4, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, you get 10. So 10 is the fourth triangular. It's 10 plus 4 equals 14. And the number 14 connects with Jesus many different ways. One of them being the genealogy. The very first chapter of the New Testament, Matthew, assuming that Matthew's the writer, Matthew is presenting Jesus' family tree. And this is a little tricky. I think he counted David twice, but this is the verse here. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David unto the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. So that's 3 sets of 14. And some of the math people out there are going to think about pi, and I'm sure there's some pi connections. Let's leave that for a comment section. This is going to be all about the number 14. Growing up Catholic, I had to learn about the 14 stations of the cross. And I guess I can read a bit of a description about the stations of the cross. The Stations of the Cross are a 14-step Catholic devotion that commemorates Jesus Christ's last day on earth as a man. The 14 devotions or stations focus on specific events of his last day, beginning with his condemnation. And I'll stop there. You can look up the 14 stations if you like. Um, Channel Lambda 115, brought up the 14 stations a while back, and his video about the number 14 and the hand, he showed that the hand has one thumb, four fingers, 1 and 4, like a 14, Interesting. And just speaking about the hand, the root word man means hand in Latin. So think about manos. I don't know. You ever heard Jesus is Emmanuel? Matthew 1:23 talks about this virgin and giving birth, and the name, people will call him Emmanuel, like Manuel. Manos, hand. It's Son of Man, the right hand of God. But about the 14 stations, you could look up the 14 stations. You might come across the words Via Crucis. It's the way of the cross. Via Crucis. If you use ordinal gematria, Via Crucis equals 105, which happens to be the 14th triangular number. So Via Crucis equals the 14th triangular number, and it just so happens to be a reference to the 14 stations of the cross. And I don't know a whole lot about lunar phases, but I did read that there's an average from new moon to full moon. The full moon would be day 14. Again, I don't really know too much about that, but full moon, that's interesting. And Jesus has some connections with the moon. In at least one of the Gospels, one of the four Gospels, near the beginning of the New Testament, it describes a solar eclipse. So the moon would be covering the sun, it seems. The day was darkened, just as Jesus died. And of course, there's the play on words, as Jesus is the light of the world, the sun is the light of the world, Jesus is the Son of God. And the sun was darkened the moment he died, it seems. That's what's been described. So it's kind of like a solar eclipse. The sun goes dark and the sun dies. Well, anyway, some more about the 14 here. So Christmas Day for a lot of the world is December 25th. If we go forwards a span of 14 days, a span meaning including the ending date, go forward a span of 14 days, that brings you to January 7th, which is Coptic Christmas Day. The Orthodox Church, Coptic Church, they celebrate Christmas a span of 14 days after the rest of the world. Anyway, so the 14th letter of the English alphabet is the letter N. And again, N is the very center of the Sator Square. Now we're looking at this image with the backwards letter S in Sator, N in Tenet, and S in Rotas. So I'm running out of time, but I got to thinking, if I show that image in a mirror, contrast with the SNS logo facing forwards. In a mirror, they're facing backwards, so to the left of that and to the right of that, there's the Sator Square. The letters have been flipped. To make it easier, off to the left is the original screenshot from Wikipedia. The N is backwards, S's are backwards. Off to the right is a mirror image kind of that square. Notice now, off to the right, 10 of the letters face backwards. 10 like Tenet. But if we geometrinate the remaining letters, with all capital letters, we have the 14th Fibonacci. Using the full reduction cipher, we get the 14th prime number, and with the ordinal cipher, we get what's equal to the 14 squared.